I always thought laughter was a beautiful sound, until I heard it coming from behind a closed door, with my name at the center of the joke. It was a late October evening. The air had that crisp sharpness that cuts through your coat, no matter how thick it is. I had just gotten home from work. Longer day than usual, stuck in traffic on the I-70, mind humming with emails I hadn't sent, deadlines I'd pushed too far. I wasn't even planning to come in the house right away. Just needed a moment to breathe, so I stayed in the car. That's when I saw the lights still on in the dining room. Her friends were over. Wine glasses clinked. The soundtrack of their laughter floated through the window I'd cracked open. It was comforting in a way, familiar. These were women I knew well. Knew by name, knew their stories. Knew the way Chelsea always overseasoned everything and bragged about it like it was a talent. Knew how Mariah had 3 failed engagements but still wore white to everyone's wedding. And then there was Heather, her best friend since high school. Heather with the quick wit and sharper tongue. They were talking about relationships. That part wasn't unusual, but something in the way they were laughing, loud, unguarded, made me stay. Not to eavesdrop, just to listen. "Come on, Heather," Chelsea said, dragging out her vowels. "If things hadn't gone south with you-know-who, you wouldn't be married to him right now." Silence. Then Mariah giggled. "Yeah, but I mean, it worked out, didn't it? Backup plans are still plans." More laughter. I didn't understand what I was hearing. Not at first. Not until Heather chimed in, voice full of wine and venom. "Oh please, it's not like she settled for him. She just made a smart move. You always keep a safety net." And then my wife, my Nora, spoke. Quietly, but clearly. "Well, at least my backup came with health insurance and a 401k. That's more than I can say for the others." The room exploded in laughter. Someone nearly knocked over a glass. And I, sitting in the car just 20 feet away, felt something I couldn't name yet. Not anger. Not even hurt. Just stillness. A cold pause. I didn't go in. I drove around for an hour instead, past gas stations and shuttered diners and strip malls that had been dead since 2008. I stopped in a parking lot near an old Blockbuster, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles cracked. I played their words over and over in my head, like I was the punchline to a joke I hadn't realized was being told for years. Backup. That word echoed. She called me her backup. When I finally came home, the house was quiet. Nora was curled up on the couch with a throw blanket, scrolling on her phone like nothing had happened. She smiled at me, sweet, like always. "Hey, babe. Long day?" I nodded, kissed her forehead, said I was just tired. And I was. Not just from work. From all of it. From realizing I was the consolation prize in the story of her life. But I didn't confront her. Not that night. Not the next morning either. I watched. She had no idea I'd heard anything. None of them did. Nora went on with her life like it hadn't cracked something deep in me. I started to notice things I hadn't before, or maybe things I'd chosen to ignore. Like how she never really asked about my day unless I brought it up first. Or how her compliments had faded into habit, like scripts read without looking at the page. She had a life filled with sharp, ambitious friends. They shared memes about leveling up and leaving men behind who couldn't match their energy. And there I was, the man who paid the mortgage, who showed up on time, who made coffee every morning and left little notes in her lunchbox like some cliché from a Hallmark movie. I began to wonder if I'd been auditioning for a role that had already been cast, if she loved me for who I was, or just for how conveniently I fit into the life she wanted. Still, I didn't say a word. Not when she joked about exes over brunch. Not when she complained about my predictability in front of her friends. Not even when I found that old photo tucked in her desk drawer, her and a guy I didn't recognize, arms wrapped around each other like they hadn't expected the moment to end. He had a crooked smile and a leather jacket. I had khakis and a Costco membership. I didn't ask, because the truth was, part of me didn't want to hear the answer. I didn't want her to tell me what I was already starting to believe. So I buried it, dug a grave in the back of my mind and tossed every doubt in there. And life moved forward, until Heather started showing up more. At first, it was casual. A weekend brunch. A weeknight wine night. A surprise drop-in with a bottle of something expensive and some story about her latest disaster date. But then she started texting me directly. Innocent stuff. Memes. Jokes. Comments about a book I'd posted online. But there was a shift. A tone. Like she was testing the waters. "You know," she texted once, I always thought Nora didn't deserve someone like you. I stared at that message for 10 minutes. Typed, "What do you mean?" 3 times and deleted it. Eventually, I replied with a thumbs up. And that silence, it didn't feel like defeat. It felt like a door cracking open. I didn't walk through it. Not yet. But I stood there, staring into the dark. The door stayed open. It wasn't dramatic, not at first. I didn't wake up one day and decide to throw away my marriage. That's not how things unravel. It's slower, subtle, like water dripping through a crack in the ceiling, barely noticeable until the drywall caves in. Heather and I didn't start anything physical. I need to say that up front. This wasn't some torrid affair with motel keys and guilty glances. No, what happened between us started with listening. She listened to me in a way Nora hadn't in years. One night, Nora was out late, some networking dinner with Chelsea and Mariah. I stayed home, made pasta, poured myself a drink, and opened my laptop. Heather texted, "Still up?" I said yes. She called. Just like that. No warning. Her voice came through the speaker like it belonged there. No small talk, no pretenses. Just, "I was thinking about you today." I didn't know what to say. She laughed softly, like she knew she'd startled me. "Relax," she said. "It's not a sin to be appreciated, you know." We talked for 2 hours. Nothing overt. Just life. Work. Her regrets. My loneliness. At one point, she said, "You're the kind of man people build with. Not around." That stuck with me. I wrote it down in a notebook the next day, like it was some quote I'd found online. I must have read it 20 times. Over the next few weeks, those talks became more frequent. Not every night, but often enough that I started to look forward to them. She'd send songs she said reminded her of me. I'd send photos of meals I'd cooked. There was an intimacy building, one not born of touch, but of something deeper. A mutual understanding that neither of us wanted to name yet. Meanwhile, things with Nora kept fading. We went to a friend's wedding and barely spoke the entire night. I watched her dance with old college buddies, watched her light up in ways I hadn't seen in years. When we sat at the table together, she scrolled through her phone. I asked her if she wanted dessert. She didn't even look up when she said no. On the way home, I asked, gently, "Are we okay?" She sighed like I'd asked her for too much. "Can we not do this tonight?" That silence between us stretched the whole ride home. And I knew, in my gut, that we weren't partners anymore. We were co-owners of a life neither of us felt excited about. Still, I stayed. Because marriage is a promise. Because leaving felt like failure. Because, somewhere deep down, I still hoped she'd turn to me one day and say, "I was wrong. You were never the backup. You were always the one." But she didn't. Then came the night that broke me. Nora invited her friends over for a small birthday get-together. I helped set the table, picked up the cake, even lit the candles. I stood back while they sang to her, smiling like I belonged there. Like I was still part of the story. But after dessert, while they all sipped wine and the conversation turned to the men we settled for, someone made a comment. Half joke, half truth. "Some guys are just practice runs," Chelsea said, tipsy. Heather didn't laugh. She looked at me across the room, then turned to Nora and said, "You think that about him?" Nora raised an eyebrow. "I mean, we all have our glow-up moments, right? He just happened to be there when I needed to level up." That room laughed again, just like before. But this time, I didn't walk away. I stood there, glass in hand, and watched my wife of 7 years reduce me to a stepping stone. And in that moment, something inside me shut off. No yelling, no confrontation, just a quiet understanding that I had stayed long enough. Later that night, while Nora slept soundly beside me, I got up and sat at the kitchen table in the dark. Heather had left early. She hadn't said goodbye. I texted her, "Did you mean what you said? About me not deserving that?" She replied almost instantly, "I've meant every word I've ever said to you." That was the night I made a plan. A slow, careful one. No revenge. No mess. Just truth and peace. Over the next few weeks, I moved money quietly. Nothing shady. Just smart. I spoke with a lawyer. I printed bank statements, mortgage documents, account summaries. I backed everything up to a drive and stored it at the office. I started packing in secret boxes of old college books, my father's watch, letters Nora had never read. And then, one afternoon, I told her I was going on a work trip. She didn't ask where. Didn't ask when I'd be back. I drove to a small town 2 states over and stayed in a quiet rental cabin. Heather met me there. She brought coffee and a silence I didn't know I needed. She didn't ask what came next. She just said, "I'll be here if you need me." I watched the trees sway in the wind, wondering how I got here. How I'd let myself become background noise in my own life. I thought of all the times I swallowed my pride, bit my tongue, played the dependable husband while my wife laughed behind closed doors. I wasn't angry. I was just done. I didn't leave with fireworks. No packed bags flung into the back of a car. No shouting match in the driveway. Just a letter. 3 pages. I left it on the kitchen counter, folded in half, my name signed at the bottom like a quiet surrender. By the time she read it, I was already gone. It's strange, the moment you choose peace over pride. I didn't write the letter to hurt her. I didn't even name Heather. I didn't tell her about the nights I sat in silence, waiting to feel like someone worth staying for. I didn't mention the jokes, or the backup comment, or the photo in her drawer. I just told her the truth. That I didn't feel loved. That I felt tolerated. That somewhere along the way, she stopped looking at me like I was enough. And that I had finally, decided to stop trying to be. She called once. I let it ring. The voicemail was short. "I didn't know you were that unhappy." I almost laughed. I wanted to say, "Of course you didn't. You weren't paying attention." But what was the point? She didn't need another explanation. She needed to sit with the emptiness I'd been living in. Maybe then she'd understand. I gave her everything I could. My time. My trust. My silence. And when none of that earned me her respect, I gave her one last gift. My absence. I stayed with Heather for a while. Not romantically. Not yet. We shared meals, long walks, the kind of quiet where nothing has to be said but everything is understood. I asked her one night, "Why did you defend me? That night at the party?" She looked up from her tea. "Because I knew you were more than she ever saw." "And why didn't you say anything sooner?" Heather smiled. "Because you weren't ready to hear it." Maybe she was right. Maybe I had to lose everything I thought I wanted in order to see what I deserved. It wasn't fast, what happened between us. There was no jumping from one woman to another. We took time. We healed. We told the truth, even when it hurt. And eventually, when the weight of the past had settled enough, we started again. Carefully. Honestly. People judged, of course. Mutual friends chose sides. Some called me a coward. Others called her a traitor. But none of them had lived in our house. None of them had heard the silence that stretched between Nora and me like a canyon we never tried to cross. One day, months later, I ran into Chelsea at the grocery store. She looked surprised to see me. "I heard you left with Heather," she said, practically spitting her name like it was spoiled milk. I nodded. "Yeah." She scoffed. "So she was your backup too, huh?" I met her eyes and smiled, not out of smugness, but because I'd finally found the words. "No," I said. "She was the one who saw me when I forgot how to see myself." Chelsea didn't respond. She just stood there, frozen in the cereal aisle, holding a box of something sugary and pointless. I left her there, just like I'd left the version of myself that used to seek their approval. I don't regret the years I spent with Nora. I really don't. I loved her. I meant every vow. But love isn't always enough. Not when it's one-sided. Not when it's handed out in rations instead of poured freely. I don't think she was cruel. I think she was scared. Of settling. Of not becoming everything she dreamed of. And maybe I reminded her of the life she once thought she'd outgrow. So she laughed. Diminished me to make the path forward easier. But I wasn't the backup. I was the man who showed up. Who stayed. Who built. And when it was time to go, I didn't burn it all down. I simply turned off the lights and closed the door behind me. And somewhere else, another door stayed open. Heather and I still talk late into the night. Not because we have to, but because we want to. And sometimes, when the world is quiet and the weight of the past starts to settle in again, she'll reach for my hand and say, "You were never the second choice. Just the one who waited too long to see your own worth." I don't know what the future holds. But I know this. I'd rather be alone and whole than loved halfway by someone who never saw me clearly. And maybe, just maybe, the best kind of love is the kind that walks in after you stop chasing the ones who never stayed.